Good afternoon, folks. We're here to introduce you to some wines today. My name is Phillips. If you don't know me, I'm a winemaker from California, though I've worked throughout the world in a variety of different spots for many, many years, about 39 years now, so I may look like I'm 25, but actually I'm not. So I think what we'll do today is try to get you interested in understanding a little bit about the regions of wine in the world, and also about the varietals that grow within those regions. Because one thing that you may not know as a starter in wine, or even if you're not a starter, maybe you're advanced, but we don't grow everything in the same place. Certain varieties grow well in certain places. It's important to know that. If you want to be an expert, you want to look like you really know what's going on, you'll need to really know where to get the best wines in the best places of the world. So we're going to go over that a little bit today. Talk about the different grapes from the different places and try to give you a little insight so that when you go out to the restaurant, you can impress your babe.
Or maybe they want to impress, maybe it's a girl watching out.
Yeah,
not all dudes here.
Well, yeah, if it's a dude, I don't know, that's a different thing. I can't help you with that. No, that doesn't work.
No, I mean, it might not be a guy watching.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it might not be, yeah, you're true. That's very true.
So that's good.
So we'll start today with what they call the first noble varietals, and the noble varietals comprise what is known as the Bordeaux varieties. The Bordeaux varieties are what you mostly probably know as Cabernet Sauvignon. There are also four other major varietals called Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot, and Malbec, which are grown in lesser levels in all the different regions. But they started out as the main varietals in Bordeaux, France. And Bordeaux, France is obviously, it's in the south. It's a warmer region, which is where these varietals grow the best. They do well in warm climates, and Bordeaux is of course known for all the great wines of that country. The Mouton Rothschilds, the Lafittes, there's some out of this world wines. But you don't necessarily have to pay $1,000 to get one of those. There's many, many good alternatives in Bordeaux and in other countries where you can get some outstanding Bordeaux varietals. Some of those other countries, of course, are America. California, we make delightful wines. Napa Valley has kind of a corner hold on Cabernet. They've really developed it, and it's a warmer region that produces great Bordeaux varietals. Other areas in California that do extremely well, Paso Robles is an up-and-coming area. Also in the San Ynez Valley, in the eastern hills of San Ynez Valley, known as Happy Canyon, really stepping out and making some great wines, and not wines that you necessarily have to pay an arm and a leg for. So keep an eye out for those. There are great wines made down in South America, in Chile, in South Africa. You can find great examples of those wines. So don't keep those off of your buying bill. You certainly can find some great products down there.
Australia?
Australia also, yeah. I think well, let's morph into Australia just a little bit, because Australia as a country has had a big hold on what they call Shiraz, and we call it here in America Syrah, but it's basically the exact same grape. But Australia, because it's a very warm climate, has done extremely well in producing those, and probably is the leader in the world for producing fine Syrahs or Shiraz. But you also, again, can get that from warmer climate regions around the world, including areas, as I mentioned, like Paso Robles in California, or in Chile, or in South Africa. So don't leave those off your list.
So what makes Cabernet Sauvignon grow well in, you said Napa, you said Sonoma, you said Paso in America, you mentioned Bordeaux in France, Coonawarra in Australia, and some places in South Africa and Chile. Why does Cabernet grow great there and nowhere else in America, or nowhere else in those countries from those regions? That's
a great question. Why does Cabernet grow well in the areas that I was explaining to you? It grows well there because a number of things. The French call it terroir. We refer to it as the sense of place. And what that means is the soil, the climate, the rainfall, the sunshine, the exposure. All those things are critical to every grape varietal. But certainly from the standpoint of Bordeaux and Bordeaux varietals, you need that warm climate. You need clay soils. You need a decent amount of rainfall. And that's where you're going to get these great wines from. So it's not about any one particular thing. It has to be a conglomerate. It has to be a focus. It's like the center of the universe. It all has to come together to make it great. Well, let's talk a little bit about where you want to get your best wines from. And specifically, let's start with the Bordeaux, since we started with that. The center of the universe for Bordeaux, of course, is Bordeaux, France. You will look like a pro if you go in and you order, a Gaufrière or a Lafite or something like that, but you don't have to do that. You'll probably end up finding a wine that's, in the $30 to $50 range that is going to delight you to death. So Bordeaux is a starting point. From that point, if California is your thing, I would take my bang for the buck and go to Napa first. I'd probably next look into Paso and look into San Ynez. But again, don't forget those other countries that I was mentioning, South Africa, South America, to some extent Australia. There are great values and great wines that are made there, so don't pass those up. Okay, so let's move on then to Sauvignon Blanc. Sauvignon Blanc is the kindred white wine to the Bordeaux varietals. It is grown extensively in France, extensively in many other areas of the world. It is a delightful white wine, a great companion to the reds, but it tends to be a lighter, softer style. And the Bordelais who created Sauvignon Blanc, they tended to make it in a little bit of a fuller style. They barrel aged it and made it just a little bit heavier, a little rounder, a little more racy. But Sauvignon Blanc has emerged as a variety that a lot of people turn to because it is light, it is fresh. It's not in a heavier style like maybe some of the Chardonnays are. They don't often have a lot of wood, oak aging, so they tend to be a little racier and a little higher in acid, a little crisper. So exciting wines. One of the best places in the world to get Sauvignon Blanc right now is out of New Zealand. New Zealand is producing some of the best Sauvignon Blancs anywhere in the world. They have the right climate and the right soils and the right exposures for it. Again, it likes a little warmer climate. It needs a little bit of water, which New Zealand gets plenty of. Unfortunately, we here in California don't. But there are some good places in California also look for Sauvignon Blanc. The warmer regions like Paso and some of the northern areas of California do very, very well, as does my home area here in Santa Barbara in the San Ynez Valley. You have to go down to South Africa and try some of their Sauvignon Blancs, which are lovely. And even into South America, there's some really, really critically acclaimed, very nice Sauvignon Blancs, and they won't hurt your pocketbook too much.
Okay, so
I'm going to take a sip.
Have another one.
No, that'll do just fine. Okay, let's talk a little bit next. Let's talk about the noble white wine, which is always referred to as Chardonnay. Chardonnay is the #1 wine in the world as far as production and consumption. It is a derivative from the area of Burgundy in France, which is still it is their main white varietal out of that area, combined with their companion red, which is Pinot Noir, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Chardonnay grows very well in many, many different regions. It's a very versatile grape. It's also what we call a winemaker's grape, because in order to affect Chardonnay, which has a very sort of a more simple character to it, it's what we as winemakers do to it that makes it really impressive. And what I mean by that is we add oak. We take the wine through malolactic fermentation, which is a process that reduces the acidity in the wine, makes it rounder, makes it more buttery, gives it marshmallow and caramel characters, makes it all those things that you love. So it's a wine that we as winemakers work hard on. It's not difficult to make, but it's all the things that we do to it that make it better. So where it grows is important. It does very best. It's very best in cool climate, and so the areas of the world that are the coolest climates make, my opinion, the best Chardonnays in the world. Burgundy, of course, stands out as one. They've been doing it for a couple of millennium. I think they've got it down. California has gotten critical acclaim across the board for the last 30 or 40 years. California won, of course, the great Paris tasting back in the 70s, where our Chardonnay from California beat out all of the great French wines in a blind tasting. So, we've learned a little thing or two as well.
what region in California?
That was done from Napa Valley. It was Chateau Montelena was the winery that had the wine that won that tasting.
So what's interesting is Cabernet does better in warmer climates, which would
Yes.
be Napa. But Chardonnay also, are they growing the grapes in Napa, or are they growing them closer to the ocean where it's a bit colder?
Well, as I was mentioning about Chardonnay, the cold climate is best for that wine, and the reason for that is it preserves the acidity in the grape and it preserves the fruit character of the grape. If you grow it in a hot climate, that tends to literally sort of burn off. So coastal climates are generally best for white varietals, and in particular Chardonnay. It does very, very well. And the one I was telling you about that won the Paris tasting was grown in southern Napa back in I believe it was 1976. It was a terrific wine. But what's happened in Napa is Cabernet has become king, and there's very little Chardonnay and Pinot Noir that are still grown up there. Most properties have now merged into producing Bordeaux varietals, in particular Cabernet Sauvignon.
So now if they're looking for a good Chardonnay from California, are they going to look at Sonoma, Russian River, Monterey? Where's it good?
Oh, well, great areas, of course, for Chardonnay. Monterey does extremely well. It's a very cool climate. It's coastal. Russian River, the areas up there, because of the coolness of the river, does extremely well for Chardonnay. Also for Pinot Noir, which is another cool climate red we'll talk about in a minute. The areas of Santa Barbara are particularly good out to the west, very near the ocean. Chardonnay and Pinot Noir are top dog, king of the mountain out there. You can't find probably better Chardonnay in California. So those are some of the regions, but you can find also fine Chardonnays from Chile, also South Africa, and you can find some actually less expensive versions coming, and good versions coming out of Australia and other areas as well.
And regions in Australia like Margaret River, or do you have specific regions that you like from places like Australia, Chile?
You know, I don't follow them that much, to tell you the truth. I don't drink much Australian Chardonnay because I'm pretty much drinking Santa Barbara. You know, I'm going with what I got. Okay. But I do know I've had many different brands, and I won't necessarily address each one of those right now, but many from Australia that are very, very good, very solid wines. Well, let's move on to Pinot Noir and talk about one of my favorite wines. Pinot Noir, I think of as the princess of reds. We think of Cabernet as the king, but Pinot Noir is really a fine example of a softer style, more elegant red wine. It's a wine that I would say many people don't start out drinking, but what they do is they end up coming back to it after having gone through a whole selection of other wines. It's a very enticing red wine. It has subtlety, it has softness, it's round, it almost has a sweet impression, but there's indeed no sugar in it, but it gives you that impression on the palate. It makes you want to have another sip. It's a lovely wine. The basis for Pinot Noir goes all the way back again to Burgundy, a cool climate area, and that's where the exports of most all Pinot Noir came from into the New World. It expanded, of course, into California. There's some unbelievably great areas in California for Pinot Noir. Russian River, as I mentioned about Chardonnay, is also really, really nice for Pinots. The area of Santa Barbara out to the west, an area called Santa Rita Hills, a killer spot, probably some of the finest in California produced. But other areas of the world are also doing some really, really nice things with Pinot. Central Otago in New Zealand, the Marlborough area as well, producing some really fine examples of Pinot Noir. But it's probably one of the most difficult red grapes to find the proper home for. So you really need, I mean, it's almost more critical with Pinot Noir than any other grape variety to get it in the right place, in the right soil, with the right exposure, the right amount of water, and all the critical things need to take place. When you do produce an exemplary Pinot Noir, it's sublime. No other wine can possibly beat it. So the one category that we haven't talked about yet are what I call the sweet wines, the dessert wines. Not necessarily all sweet wines are dessert wines, but They started out with varietals like Johannesburg Riesling, some of the other German varietals like Gewürztraminer and Müller-Thurgau. Germany, because it was a very cold climate, they planted these grapes, and oftentimes the weather would turn so fast that the grapes would actually freeze before they could be picked. What happened when that took place is it actually concentrated out the water, the sugar remained, the grapes remained very sweet, and the wines ended up having residual sugar in them, which made them, of course, taste very pleasant, sweet, obviously, but also with really nicely retained acidity. So those grapes are marginally planted in other areas of the world. Austria does very well with those, as does Germany, as does the Alsace region of France. There are some areas of California that still do Riesling and Gewürztraminer and some of the other ones. But you'd probably go to the European countries to find the finest examples, I think, of those particular wines. With the exception of the Sauternes region in France, which produces a late harvest style wine produced from Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon. And you might know this as the king of that area of Sauternes, which is Chateau Yquem, one of the finest examples of Sauternes probably ever made. Very delightful wine, very low supply and very high demand, and unfortunately very expensive. But if you do have an opportunity to try it, you'll never forget it. It's absolutely delicious. So look around for Sauternes. Look to Germany for the Rieslings, Austria as well, and the northern area of France. In the Alsace region, you'll find some really delightful examples of those wines. Okay, so well, Tempranillo, let's talk about that for a second. And let's just morph into the Spanish varietals in general. They have taken a small foothold here in America. Tempranillo and as the red, probably Albarino as the white. Have been the ones of most significance. They're also probably the most significant in Spain. They make very classic examples of what you consider to be Spanish wines. They age their red wines for a great length of time, which softens the wine, makes them very round, very supple, very approachable. The warmer climates where the Albarino is grown yields a very nice, full-bodied, round, soft-style white wine. You'll find examples around various parts of the world, but the best examples are going to indeed come from Spain. Now, if we move to Italy, where we've got some examples of quite specific grapes there as well, you've got Sangiovese as one of the big varietals there, the red varietal, and it makes delightful wines from all over the country. The white variety that's probably of the most importance for Italy is called Pinot Grigio. The most delightful examples of those come up from the north area near the Dolomites, right on the border. Very good acidity, very crisp, very clean. But the red wines, you can find examples of wonderful wines from Chianti, from Montepulciano, Barolos, Amarognes. Amarognes are made from a dried grape. Very concentrated, very rich, very full body. It might be a wine that you might in fact put in your closet and come back to in 10 years, and it'll still be delightful. If I've left out any region, any wine, or any particular interesting anecdote that you might have, please be in contact with us. You can get down to the bottom of our site here and get on the chat, let me know. I'll be happy to get back to you and fill you in on any details I might have left out. Please join us for our next one, and look forward to it.